It didn't fall apart. God tore it apart. You didn't just walk away. Heaven intervened. And the narcissist didn't win. They lost the best thing God ever allowed into their life. That's the truth. That's the reason you're still breathing, still standing, still healing. You didn't escape by accident. You were delivered. Because if you had stayed one more year, one more week, that soul-destroying connection might have taken everything from you, even your faith. Here at C.S. Lewis 2025, we don't just talk about survival. We speak the truth about spiritual rescue, restoration, and God's divine justice. And today's message is one you weren't supposed to miss. Because now that you've been separated by divine force, with your heart shattered but your spirit still intact, you find yourself wondering, do they even care? Do they think about me at all? Here's the truth that will shake your soul awake. Yes, they think about you, constantly, but not the way you think, not for the reasons you hope. Let's walk through it together. They never stopped thinking about you, because you were never just another person. You were never disposable, though they treated you like you were. You were never forgettable, though they pretended you vanished. And you were certainly never ordinary, though they tried to downplay everything God placed in you. The narcissist still thinks about you, and not because they love you or wish to make things right. No, they think about you because your absence left a spiritual echo that continues to haunt them. They remember how you gave freely, how you gave quickly, how you saw the best even when they gave you their worst. They remember your prayers, your silence, your tears, not because it moved them, but because it marked them. You weren't just a romantic partner. You were a divine interruption, a holy disruption, a spiritual force placed in their life to confront a lie they had been living for years. The lie that they could stay broken, manipulative, and selfish, and still be deeply loved without ever changing. And you loved them, not blindly, but deeply. You saw glimpses of their pain, their potential, their past wounds. You hoped, you fought, you waited. But the more you gave, the more they took. The more you trusted, the more they twisted. And then, without warning, it ended. Maybe they discarded you, or maybe you finally walked away, but either way, it felt violent, sudden, soul-shaking, like something sacred had been ripped in half. And perhaps you asked yourself, was it all a waste? Did they ever care? Do they even think of me now? Let me be clear, yes they do, but not in the way you hope, and not for the reasons you might want. They think about you because you were the last place they felt real mercy, and they abused it. You were the last place they tasted unconditional love, and they spit it out. And whether they admit it or not, they know they'll never find that again. They may move on quickly, post happy photos, flaunt someone new, but beneath it all, in the hollow rooms of their unrepentant heart, your name still echoes, not because they want you back, but because they can't escape the mirror you held up to their soul. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. John 1:5. You were that light. That's what they remember, and that's what torments them. Let me bring you to a story many forget but few truly understand. The prophet Samuel was deeply connected to King Saul. He had been the one to anoint him, to guide him, to intercede on his behalf. Samuel believed in Saul's calling, just as you once believed in the calling of the person who hurt you. He saw potential in Saul. He hoped for growth. He prayed for change. But Saul didn't change. He hardened. And God saw what Samuel couldn't yet accept, that Saul's pride had become a wall against obedience, that his arrogance had overtaken his humility, that no amount of prophetic counsel could reach a heart that had already closed its doors to God. So God intervened. How long will you mourn for Saul, since I have rejected him as king over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and be on your way. Samuel 16:1. God wasn't just asking Samuel to move on. He was making a divine separation. Samuel had done everything right. And yet God was saying, "This assignment is over. This connection has expired. Stop grieving what I have already removed." Sound familiar? Some of you were spiritually connected to a Saul, someone who had a position in your heart, a calling on their life, but refused to surrender to the process of transformation. You mourned, you stayed, you hoped, you endured, but eventually the voice of God grew louder than your loyalty. And He pulled you out, not because you failed, but because your assignment had been completed and their heart was not going to change. You were Samuel and they were Saul. And what's powerful about that story is this: even after God removed Saul, Saul never stopped thinking about Samuel. Saul grew desperate for him. He called for him in distress. He tried to reach him again, even through forbidden spiritual channels, because he knew, I've lost the one person who knew me and still stood beside me. Let that sink in. You were that for someone. The one who knew their pain, their past, their weakness, and still showed up, still believed, still forgave. And now, you're gone. Not bitter, not vengeful, just gone. That silence speaks louder than your words ever did, and they hear it every single day. They know the door has closed, and what's behind it was sacred, and they won't get it back. They still think about you, not because they want reconciliation, but because they've tasted something eternal and spit it out, and what they lost was the favor of God through your life. Your presence was an atmosphere of grace. Your patience was a covering of mercy. Your intercession was spiritual warfare on their behalf. And now you are covered, and they are exposed. You were never just a person. You were a bridge to God's mercy, and they burned it. That's why you're unforgettable, not because of what you said, but because of who you were in the Spirit. Then Samuel went to Ramah, but Saul went up to his house, and Samuel did not see Saul again to the day of his death. Nevertheless, Samuel mourned for Saul. 1 Samuel 15:34-35. Yes, Samuel mourned. You did too. But the separation stood, because once God removes you, it is done. They resent you because you reflect the truth, and they hate the truth. The deeper you loved them, the more they resented you, not because you harmed them, not because you betrayed them, but because you refused to abandon the truth in order to maintain their illusion. Your presence, calm, consistent, filled with discernment and grace, became a threat to the very identity they had spent years crafting. And when someone lives inside a false self, the last thing they want is a mirror. But that's exactly what you were. You never set out to expose them. You were simply being who you are, truthful, loving, deeply loyal, and spiritually sensitive. You didn't confront them with accusations. Your character alone was confrontation enough. Your peace made their chaos obvious. Your humility made their pride look grotesque. Your willingness to forgive made their cruelty undeniable. And over time, your very existence began to undo the narrative they had built about themselves. They couldn't pretend to be the victim when your kindness kept showing up. They couldn't act like they were being attacked when your gentleness refused to fight. The more you stayed true to who you were, the more it revealed who they were pretending to be. And because they could not change you, they began to hate you. Not loudly at first, not with obvious rage, but with the slow growing bitterness that begins when someone realizes they are no longer the most powerful voice in the room. When someone like you enters the life of a narcissist, they are initially drawn to your light. You feel safe. You feel clean. You feel like something they've long craved but never earned. But once they realize that your light doesn't worship their darkness, once they realize you can see too clearly, the admiration quickly turns into animosity. That's when they begin to twist stories, rewrite reality, and cast you as the villain in a drama you never auditioned for. You see, the narcissist does not hate you because you lied. They hate you because you wouldn't let their lies continue. You wouldn't accept their excuses. You wouldn't normalize their chaos. You didn't give in when they gaslit you. And worst of all, you didn't collapse when they expected you to. That moment, the one where you stood your ground, kept your dignity, chose silence over reaction. That was the moment their resentment solidified, because you were no longer someone they could mold. You were someone God had begun to strengthen, and that strength shook them. This resentment runs deep, not because of anything you did wrong, but because of what you did right. You told the truth, not just with words, but with the way you lived. You reflected back to them everything they were trying to avoid, their patterns, their deception, their brokenness. You didn't play along. You didn't bow to the false self. You remained grounded while they spiraled. And they knew, on a level they will never admit, that your presence was divinely disruptive. You weren't there to punish them, but your faithfulness, your values, your integrity, all of it exposed how far they had drifted from God's design. Jesus said, "Everyone who does evil hates the light and will not come into the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed." John 3:20. That wasn't just true in the first century, it's true now. Some people cannot tolerate light, not because it's violent, but because it's revealing. You weren't too much for them, you were too honest for the lies they wanted to keep. You weren't too sensitive, you were too awake in a house built on denial. That's what they hated. And now, even after you've gone silent, they still carry that resentment. Not because you're still hurting them, but because your absence continues to confirm that they lost something real. You were the last person to see them clearly and still offer mercy. You were the last one who loved them past their surface, who hoped for their healing, who waited for their change. And now, that door is closed. Not because you shut it out of bitterness, but because God stepped in and removed you for your protection. So if you ever find yourself wondering, why are they still angry at me? Why do they twist the truth about me to others? Remember this, they're not angry because you betrayed them. They're angry because you revealed them. You reminded them of what they refused to face. And now, every time your name comes up, every time they remember your presence, they're not just remembering you, they're remembering the truth you carried. And that truth still stings. You were never the problem. You were the mirror. You were the interruption. You were the assignment sent by God to shine light into a place that had made peace with shadows. And when you stopped reflecting the lie and started walking in truth, the spirit inside them began to rage, not at you, but at the conviction they could no longer suppress. So stand in that truth today, and if you know this word is for you, I want you to declare it out loud. I didn't destroy them, I exposed them. I reflected truth. They resented your presence because it reminded them of what they refused to become. They tried to replace you, but only found shadows. One of the most painful illusions after you separate from a narcissist is watching how quickly they seem to move on. In what feels like moments, they appear in new relationships, smiling in photographs, writing poetic captions, declaring love that took you years to earn. You see them laughing, embracing someone new, even getting engaged or remarried, and in that moment, your mind may begin to betray you. Maybe you wonder, Were they ever really connected to me at all? Did I mean anything? Was I really that easy to replace? But what you're seeing is not healing, it's hiding. What looks like happiness is often a performance, a coping mechanism, a desperate attempt to erase the one thing they can't outrun, the memory of who you were and what you brought into their life. The narcissist didn't move on from you. They ran away from the mirror you held up, and they grabbed the closest available reflection to distract themselves from the truth. But here's what they discovered, and what they will never admit. They can't recreate what they destroyed, because what they had with you wasn't just emotional connection, it was spiritual atmosphere. It was mercy in human form. It was undeserved patience. It was intercession wrapped in flesh. It was grace they couldn't buy or manipulate. They didn't replace you, they downgraded, and they know it. Even if they don't say it out loud, even if they never confess it to anyone else, there are moments when they look at the person they're with now and they feel the ache of absence, not because the new person is bad, but because the depth, the safety, the spiritual grounding they once had in your presence has vanished. They might smile more, laugh louder, pose often, but it is often nothing more than noise to drown out what they lost. They tried to copy your essence in someone else. They wanted the warmth without the fire, the strength without the conviction, the softness without the discernment. But you weren't just a personality. You were anointed. You were not perfect, but you were covered. And the kind of covering you carried doesn't just come along again. It is placed. It is cultivated. It is forged in faithfulness and refined through fire. And when they rejected you, they weren't just rejecting love. They were rejecting a divine lifeline. Now, they live surrounded by people who may admire them, validate them, even fear them, but not one of those people truly sees them. And in their most vulnerable moments, when the lights are off and the applause fades, they remember you, not with fondness but with torment, because you were the last person who loved them without needing them to be someone they're not. And that kind of love, the kind that sees beneath the performance, beneath the projection, and still chooses to stay, is unforgettable. But it's gone now, and they can't replace it. They can build new relationships, but they are always haunted by comparisons. They begin to mold the new person, pushing them to dress like you, speak like you, share your values, laugh at your jokes, think your thoughts. They try to carve your image into a soul that was never meant to carry it. And when the new person inevitably fails to reflect what they want, the narcissist doesn't blame themselves. They grow restless, irritated, distant, because deep down they know the truth. There was only one you. And here's the part that cuts the deepest. Some of them realize it too late. They see what they had, but only after it's gone. And because pride won't allow them to admit the truth, they bury that realization under layers of anger and deflection. But it remains. It festers. It leaks out in moments they can't control. A song that reminds them of you, a scent, a phrase, a photograph, a memory that catches them off guard, and suddenly the life they tried to build on the ashes of what they burned feels hollow, unstable, forced. And they begin to wonder not just what they lost, but who they would have become if they had just allowed your love to change them. But the door is closed now, not because you are heartless, but because God, in His mercy, will not let you return to a place that was trying to steal your identity. You were not meant to be repeated. You were meant to be remembered as the one who gave them a glimpse of what real, Christ-like love looks like, and what it feels like when that love walks away. They tried to replace you, but all they found was a shallow version of a depth they weren't ready for. They surrounded themselves with bodies, but they remain emotionally alone. They echo empty promises, but their soul is still hungry. Because you were more than someone who loved them. You were someone who carried the evidence of God's grace, and you offered it without cost. But now it cost them everything. They didn't just lose you. They lost the safest place their soul had ever known. They lie about you because the truth shames them. If you've ever heard the lies they tell about you, the stories they spread, the twisting of facts, the complete distortion of your character, you've probably wondered, how could they say that after everything I did for them? It doesn't make sense. It's not just cruel, it feels evil. It's like watching your reputation, your truth, and your heart being dragged through the mud while they smile and pretend to be the victim. But here's what you must understand. The lies are not really about you. They are a cover, a smokescreen to protect the fragile, decaying ego of someone who knows, deep down, that they were the ones who failed you. Because if they were honest, they'd have to admit that they were loved with a kind of love they didn't earn and couldn't return. They'd have to acknowledge that they were seen, cared for, and covered in moments when they didn't deserve it. And that kind of truth would shatter the false self they've spent years, maybe decades, constructing. So instead, they reverse the roles. They spin tales. They rewrite history. They turn your strength into aggression, your boundaries into abandonment, your discernment into delusion. Why? Because they are ashamed, and they can't afford to face the shame. In their twisted world, you must become the problem so that they can remain the misunderstood hero. They wear a mask in public, but your memory keeps pulling at the edges of it. And if they don't silence your truth, it threatens to undo everything they've told themselves about who they are. They lie because the truth makes them feel exposed. They lie because you know too much. You were there during the breakdowns and the contradictions. You heard what they said behind closed doors. You witnessed the double life, the manipulations, the spiritual emptiness they tried to hide. And now that you're gone, the only way they can feel safe again is by trying to discredit the one person who saw through them. But let's be clear. This isn't just emotional immaturity, it's spiritual deception. This is what happens when someone has aligned themselves with the enemy of truth for so long, they begin to fight against the very thing that could have healed them. In John 8:44, Jesus described Satan as a liar and the father of lies, and anyone who refuses truth and chooses image over integrity becomes a willing vessel for that same spirit. That's what you were dealing with, not just a difficult person, but a spirit of deception that hates truth and attacks anyone who carries it. And you carried it well. Even now, they lie because you're still shining. You're still standing. And they can't understand how someone who has lost everything could still have peace. So they continue to speak against you, not realizing that every lie they tell is further proof of their own spiritual poverty. Because those who walk in light don't need to tear down others. But those who are drowning in darkness, they can't stand to see anyone emerge from it. Yes, it hurts. Yes, it's unjust. But let me speak this over you. God has recorded every word. He has seen the dishonor, the character assassination, the confusion they've created, and he is not mocked. Proverbs 19:5 says, "A false witness will not go unpunished, and whoever pours out lies will not go free." You don't have to defend yourself. You don't have to clear your name in every room. Your name is being defiled because God will do it for you. Heaven knows the truth, and it will have the final say. There is something holy about not retaliating, about keeping your hands clean when your heart wants justice. There is something powerful about entrusting your name, your story, your reputation into the hands of the one who sees all and vindicates completely. The narcissist may think they've rewritten the past, but truth is eternal, and every lie they tell becomes a weight that will return to them in time. They lie because they fear you. They fear your clarity. They fear your memory. They fear your peace. But most of all, they fear that others will believe you. Because you don't have to convince anyone. Your life speaks louder than their stories, and the longer you stay silent, the louder the contrast becomes. Their accusations sound increasingly hollow. Their stories start to collapse under the weight of inconsistency. Because even lies eventually tire out. But truth stands, always. What they said about you may sting, but what God says about you still holds. And no smear campaign can erase the favor of the Lord. They may lie to cover their shame, but your life, marked by grace, refined by fire, anchored in truth, will be the evidence that their lies cannot outlive what God Himself has established. They regret losing you, but it's a twisted regret. It's a strange and painful thing to realize that someone regrets losing you, but not for the right reasons. You may think they lie awake at night, missing your heart, your laughter, your spirit. And maybe, in moments, they do. But the regret that lives inside a narcissist is not born of humility. It does not bring them to repentance. It does not push them toward transformation. It's a regret soaked in pride, wrapped in control, and rooted in one devastating truth. They didn't get to finish breaking you. Oh, 'tis worth. They regret losing their access to your light, your love, your peace, not because they honor those things, but because they fed on them. And now that you're gone, now that the door is closed and your heart has begun to heal, they are left with the sobering awareness that they've been cut off from a kind of emotional and spiritual supply they'll likely never experience again. But rather than cry out to God in sorrow, they simmer in bitterness. Rather than accept accountability, they replay their sense of entitlement. They don't miss you. They miss the version of you that was still within their control. This is what makes their regret so distorted. They don't regret the abuse, the manipulation, the deception. They regret that you stopped tolerating it, that you stopped calling it love, that you stopped sacrificing your well-being for their chaos. And when you stopped showing up, not out of revenge, but out of clarity, their illusion crumbled. Because as long as you stayed, even in suffering, they could pretend that they were still worthy. But when you left, it confirmed what they secretly feared. You were the one who carried the real value in the relationship. They regret, not because of what they lost in terms of affection, but because they lost control over the narrative. You now live outside their influence. They can no longer shape how you feel, what you believe, or how you respond. And that is infuriating to someone who depends on dominance to feel relevant. They are no longer the center of your world, and the center is the only place they know how to exist. So they panic, they spin, they look for a new stage, a new audience, a new victim. But nothing truly satisfies, because deep down they know they had something real and they ruined it. They didn't expect you to recover. They didn't plan on you finding clarity, discovering your worth, stepping into the presence of God with confidence again. They thought they had time to circle back, to test the waters, to reappear once the pain had softened into longing. But something divine happened instead. God didn't just heal you, He transformed you. He sealed the door behind you. He hardened the boundary they once walked through freely. And now they find themselves stuck outside, not just of your life, but of your light. There is something terrifying about being remembered only as the one who destroyed what was holy. Something haunting about knowing you had a living demonstration of mercy in your hands, and you used it for your own gain. That kind of regret doesn't inspire repentance in the narcissist. It breeds obsession. Because now, every time they see someone who carries even a glimpse of what you carried, They are reminded of the original. They compare, they search, but nothing measures up. Because here's what they won't admit. You were the standard. Not because you were flawless, but because you were authentic. You didn't perform. You didn't manipulate. You loved from the soul. You gave without expectation. You endured more than you should have. And they mistook that for weakness. But now they know it was strength. A strength they will never be able to recreate or counterfeit. And the most sobering part of it all, they'll likely never say it out loud. Their pride is too loud. Their delusion is too thick. So they'll sit with their twisted regret, covering it with excuses, blame, and distractions. But the memory of you will not leave. It will follow them into new relationships. It will echo in their quiet moments. It will linger on birthdays, holidays, and sleepless nights, because they didn't just lose someone who loved them. They lost someone who tried to love the part of them that even they had abandoned. You saw the child within them, buried beneath the adult mask. You tried to reach the soul beneath the facade. You weren't just another person passing through. You were a lifeline, a divine interruption, a glimpse of God's grace in a human frame. And now that you're gone, they feel it. Not in a way that humbles them, but in a way that torments them. Because for all their charm and control, they could not stop you from slipping through the cracks they refused to seal. They could not keep what they refused to honor. And what they now regret is a testimony of what they once had, but never truly received. Their regret is not your closure. Their remorse is not your responsibility. Let it stand as a quiet witness to what God has brought you out of, and what He refused to let you return to. You are not forgotten, you are sealed, you are chosen. There comes a moment, often quiet, without warning, when you stop looking at them and start seeing yourself. A moment when you realize that all this time you've been waiting for them to validate what God already confirmed about you long ago. You've spent sleepless nights asking if they miss you, if they regret it, if they think of you. But what you really needed to ask was this: what does God say about me now? Because their thoughts, their regret, their obsession, they are nothing compared to what heaven is declaring over your life. The narcissist thinks about you, yes, but not because they love you. They think about you because you are living proof of their failure to destroy what God preserved. You are a walking reminder that even hell's best strategy didn't succeed. They didn't break you. They couldn't steal your light. And the reason they are haunted is not because you're still chained to them. It's because you've been loosed, and they don't know what to do with that freedom. But more importantly, and this is the revelation too many overlook, you weren't just separated from them, you were set apart by God. That separation wasn't just a closing of a door, it was a sealing of identity, a declaration in the spirit realm that you are chosen, protected, and anointed for something far beyond their reach. Let that sink in. What they mishandled, God is redeeming. What they devalued, God is restoring. And what they tried to define, God is now reintroducing, not according to their labels, but according to His original design. You were not rejected. You were rerouted. You were not discarded. You were delivered. You were not abandoned. You were appointed. They thought you would stay stuck, caught in emotional limbo, wondering if you were ever enough. But instead, God stepped in, not only to pull you out, but to pull you forward. And what they never saw coming was that the very person they tried to erase would become the very person heaven is now elevating. Not in arrogance, not in revenge, but in righteous purpose. Because you are not who they said you were. You are not the weak one. You are not the burden. You are not too much. You are not disposable. You are not a backup plan or a fallback option. You are God's design, God's handiwork, God's beloved. And your identity was never tied to their acceptance. You are. The moment you were separated, heaven didn't just whisper your name, it engraved it on the palm of his hand. You are not forgotten. You are not invisible. You are not wandering without direction. The loss was real, the betrayal was deep, the trauma was heavy, but none of it has disqualified you from the destiny God has already written. On the contrary, it has qualified you all the more to walk in power, compassion, discernment, and fire. Because here's what the enemy didn't calculate. When you walked through the fire, you came out with authority. When you cried alone in your room, angels were dispatched to your side. When you chose not to fight back, heaven fought for you. When you let go of vengeance, God began writing your vindication. And now, not someday, not years from now, but now, you are becoming the version of yourself the narcissist always tried to suppress. And perhaps the most stunning truth of all, it was never about them. This story, this pain, this journey, it was always about you and God, about your healing, about your calling, about your return to your true identity. The narcissist was a detour, but you are a destiny. They were a mirror that cracked. You are a vessel being restored. They were a moment. You are an eternal work in progress, sculpted by the hands of grace. You may have walked into that relationship hoping to find love, only to discover warfare. But now, you're walking out of the battle with your name still intact, your heart being healed, and your God walking beside you. And from this point forward, your story is no longer marked by what they did. It is marked by what God is doing. They may remember you, they may regret you, but none of that matters anymore, because He remembers you. And in His remembrance is restoration. In His remembrance is justice. In His remembrance is everything the enemy tried to strip away, and more. You are not just free. You are sealed. You are called. You are chosen. You didn't just survive. You were separated, set apart, sealed by God for something greater than anything the narcissist could ever imagine. Let them think. Let them wonder. Let them regret. But you walk in truth now. You carry peace they can't steal and purpose they'll never understand. If this message brought clarity, comfort, or confirmation to your soul, and you feel led to support what we're building here, we welcome your partnership in any way God puts on your heart. Your presence means more than you know, and your generosity helps us continue speaking light into dark places. We'll walk this journey together.